Welcome to the Transformation Talks podcast, in-depth conversations on transformation with Rajiv Dingra, founder and CEO of RDNX Network.
Hi everyone, welcome to Transformation Talks podcast. Today is an exciting day because we have someone whom I am very eagerly looking forward to talk to. He is Redmond, a 20-year veteran technologist who always happens to be where history is made, from creating the first iPhone apps to data pioneer to early Bitcoin investor. He has been an advisor to state and national governments in US, to Fortune 100 companies, and groups as varied as the World Economic Forum and MIT Media Lab. He has authored half a dozen technology books, including the latest soon to be published one called Deep Tech. That's one I'm looking forward to. It talks about a lot of things which we are going to talk to Eric about. He's also a prolific speaker who has spoken on every continent but Antarctica. That'd be quite freezing if he spoke there, and currently leads the global technology innovation team at Nike. So we are very excited to welcome Eric. Eric, welcome to Transformation Talks.
Yeah, Rajiv, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great, Eric. Eric, we've just, all of us globally, the world has become a small place since last year, and you've been in the heart of technology over the last 2 decades. How do you see the year that's gone by, the pandemic year 2020, and what changes do you think it has brought about for the coming decade?
I mean, I think the biggest and most obvious change that people are going to notice or have seen and lived because of all of the lockdowns, because retail outfits have been closed, because grocery stores have been closed. Globally, you're seeing a huge spike in e-commerce sales. And by most accounts, it's not that these trends weren't going to happen, where a majority of sales for certain brands and certain companies are happening online and direct to consumer rather than through wholesale channels and physical retail outfits. It was going to happen anyway. What's I think surprised everyone is just the acceleration of 5 to 10 years in many cases. So some of the places we thought we wouldn't be to until 2030 are today.
Interesting. And you lead the global innovation technology innovation team at Nike. So tell us a little bit about a bit of the work that Nike has done, which its philosophy and approach towards technology innovation. Do you have anything to share with us? We'd love to know more about that exciting stuff you're doing at Nike.
Yeah, one of the downsides about being in an innovation team is I can't talk about most of the work I do because it's confidential, but I can talk about some of the things that have been made public, whether by my team or the company as a whole. And one I sort of alluded to, that sort of spike in direct to consumer through digital channels has been talked about quite a bit. I mean, on our last earnings call, they talked about the fact that 15% of Nike sales are now direct, where we didn't think we would be there until 2025, 2026. So it's really accelerated by half a decade. The other kind of work we focus on is just look, there's digital transformation going on, and just like any company, we're focused on that. And there's sort of two sides of digital transformation, right? There's the how do you digitize your internal process, digitize your supply chain, add traceability of assets and that kind of thing. On the other side, there's how do you meet consumers who are increasingly living in a digital world, not to mention the generation Gen Z that's growing up now, and they're just kind of coming into the consumer market, and they live online, and it's very disruptive, I think, to a lot of companies where, and I'm not talking about Nike specifically, just in general, it used to be that as long as you delivered well and delivered efficiently, you were doing a good job. But it's not enough now. And what I think brands are starting to realize is there's not a distinction anymore between your digital strategy and your physical strategy. Gen Z kids don't separate their lives between living in the digital world and living in the physical world. They're one and the same. And so the companies and brands that are going to be the most successful going forward are the ones that internalize and understand that and are working on making that a reality today. And that's really what the book is about, is this next decade of transformations that are going to unlock that requirement.
That's interesting. What you're really saying is that, we should stop calling it digital transformation and just transformation that companies need to make for the new world order that we face today, right?
Yeah, I would go even further and say that this now is just the cost of doing business. And that's requiring a wholesale think of IT. I'll give an example. I've seen more books and articles, for example, talking about how important it is for the CFO and CIO of corporations to be working together and in lockstep over the last year than I have in the previous decade before. Before, technology was viewed just like any other function in a company, and it's now being, I think, understood that this isn't even a market differentiator anymore. This is a matter of survival. You either do technology well, or you won't be here in 10 years.
That's interesting. I read somewhere, and it I don't know who said this, but do you concur with the fact that in the future, or in the very near future, most companies are going to be software companies, at least the ones that survive. Their competitive advantage will come from software as well, or how they use software to deliver what they are delivering.
Yeah, I believe that was an Andreessen Horowitz quote from about a decade ago, and it was all companies are software companies, I think was the quote.
Yes.
And not only do I agreed with that then. Yeah, it's necessary, but at this point, it's like saying all companies are finance companies. If you don't have your finances in order, if you don't understand your cash flow, if you don't have a strong, balance sheet and P&L and all of that, you're not going to be a very healthy company if you don't understand that. And I think any major company does understand that very well. What I think they're starting to wake up to is they have to have this same frame of mind when it comes to technology. I mean, I talk about CIO or CEOs, for example. It's like it used to be that if you were a CEO, you had a pretty good handle on your finance, you had a pretty good handle on your marketing and sales channels, and you had a sense of what your consumer needed. You were a pretty good CEO. I think now we're getting to the point where you have to understand technology as well. You can no longer be ignorant of the technology that's transforming everything, and that's really what this book is about. Is it's educating senior leaders and executives on the basics of. Because it's not just one or two things anymore. It's not like, the last decade was all about cell phones. And if you understood apps and cell phones, you were probably doing all right. And you understood the web, you were probably doing all right. Now, you've got to understand AI. You've got to understand extended reality. You've got to understand IoT. I mean, just on and on and on. It's becoming too much. And so there is going to be a minimal literacy necessary to be a successful leader over the next decade.
That's fascinating. And do you think this transformation that's going to be driven by deep tech, do you think businesses will need to make a lot of talent transformation in-house, or they can get by through external help and consulting, so as to say?
I think it's both. I think you are seeing a move towards more flex forces and combinations of. I mean, one thing that the global pandemic has done is shown companies that you don't need to have everyone co-located in the same office building in order to be successful. We've been doing business pretty well over the last year through Zoom. I mean, we're doing this call over a video conference as well. and that has interesting implications because we've been forced to run this experiment. And the outcome is, yeah, you can actually start hiring people anywhere. Some of those people are going to be full-time. Some of those people are going to be part-time, sort of gig economy experts. Some of those people are going to be contractors. I think that it's opening up a world for more flexibility when it comes to what your workforce is,
or where they are.
or where they are. Yes.
Fantastic. Let's get to the 7 technologies that we've noticed you mention in the teaser website about your book. Tell us more about what are these 7 technologies. How are they going to disrupt the next decade, according to you? And you mentioned they're probably going to create $100 trillion impact. So tell us a lot more about it.
Yeah.
Take us through these 7.
Yeah. So the 7 technologies are sort of the top of a whole list. By the way, the list can go on and on, but the top 7 are artificial intelligence and machine learning, which we're already seeing a big impact there. Extended reality, which is virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. For example, for virtual reality, you're seeing Oculus 2. I just found out that Oculus 2, there are over 60 apps that are making $1 million in revenue on it. That's pretty huge for a modality that hasn't really been practical for more than a year or two. Augmented reality. So you've got HoloLens. Microsoft's making some big bets behind that. Mixed reality as well. Internet of Things, IoT. Obviously, there are a lot of companies that are already making tremendous gains and installations of this. And I'll go back to IoT in a bit. And because I think it's sort of fascinating in the world of how IT departments are going to have to operate in the future because of IoT specifically. But IoT, by the way, includes wearables, for example. I would say that in wearables are IoT. It's just you are the thing that is being interneted, and smart homes and smart cities and all of that. The 4th one is autonomous vehicles. I give that its own section rather than robotics in general. I do believe that robots are a big part of this. Autonomous robots. I've met with the guys and been able to drive the Spot robot for Boston Dynamics. It's so simple to use. It's pretty fascinating to see it in the future. The only reason I shy away from the word robots, because I think the autonomy is the interesting part here, is a friend of mine is fond of saying, we only call things robots that are unreliable, because once they're reliable, we just call them washing machines. We'll just call them what they do. And so autonomous vehicles are definitely, I think, going to be the most transformative of all of those sort of body of autonomous robots. The next is cryptocurrencies. Obviously, we're seeing this big spike in Bitcoin right now. I think it's hovering between 30 and 40,000 a coin again. Interestingly enough, when I started writing this book, that was the first chapter I wrote, which was 2 years ago, and I was talking about 2017. And it's funny to see that a book that's not even out yet is already a bit dated, because I should have been talking about 2020. However, there's cryptocurrencies, and there's sort of the backing technology of blockchain and distributed ledger technology, which is sort of the general.
Do you see a lot of opportunity for blockchain and distributed ledger in the enterprise space? I mean, that's also in some way is blowing up with the big guys investing into the technology stack and not the currency stack, if I may call it, of the same technology.
Yeah. It's a good question. Actually, I will get back to that. I want to get through these last 2, and then we'll loop back around the collection. It is a fascinating topic. The next one is additive manufacturing, aka 3D printing, is what we call that. But really, it's computer managed manufacturing. What makes 3D printing so fascinating is because it's additive. It allows you to create unique individual designs that you can't really do with subtractive manufacturing in some cases, but you can also do them individually, which is where we call it eaches at scale, or individuals at scale, or unique at scale. So, imagine a world, for example, you 3D print shoes and they're designed specifically for your foot. That's where I think, and plus it allows the unlock of new materials. So 3D printing is another sort of fascinating trend. The last one I put out there, it's really sort of the end of the decade, but it's quantum computers. And quantum computers are, out of all of these technologies, the only ones that aren't really being used in industry today. Although I did just read about BMW is going to start using quantum computers to optimize parts of their supply chain, which is fascinating. I think that was just published yesterday. So they're starting to get some use. They're getting powerful enough for a certain class of problems. But by the end of the decade, once some of this basic research is out of the way and the investment has been made and there's being scaled, quantum computers, I think, more than anything else on this list, are going to be probably the most disruptive technology.
That's fascinating. And you mentioned you wanted to come back to IoT and blockchain. So let's go back to those two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So blockchain specifically. So I was on a committee with the World Economic Forum focused on using blockchain in supply chain, sort of making some recommendations on how this could be used. And what was interesting was the topic of conversation was never about the technology. The technology is there, it works. That's not really the question. The question is, are you using it for the right purposes, for the right use cases? And is what's the governance model look like? Because the whole point of blockchain is that you add something to the blockchain and it's not removable. So should that be the case when you're talking about sort of industrial scale supply chain applications? And if that isn't the case and changes do need to be made, who can make changes, and doesn't the very fact that you can make changes destroy the whole value of the blockchain? So it becomes sort of this interesting circular conversation. And so every conversation really becomes about governance at the end of the day. Blockchain, I think, is interesting because the conversations that it's forcing to be had between companies. I mean, the idea that I have my company and you have your company, and we are competing against each other, and we might cooperate through very specific channels, is going to start opening up a bit, where companies cooperate through consortiums on a deeper level. For example, say that you're a company that makes a product and you have a whole lot of retail wholesale partners, and I as the manufacturer, you put your inventory on blockchain. The retail customers can now see what the total inventory is, not just in their own doors, but also in potentially their competitors' doors. Now, you might think that that's a bad thing, but for those who are part of that consortium and they can choose what they would put on this network, imagine a scenario where I'm a customer and I walk into a store and I want to buy this product and we don't have it in stock, but your competitor down the street does have one in stock. There's a few ways you can play that. And what you can do is just say, look, I'm going to buy it from that store, and I'm going to have somebody run down there. It's 2 blocks away, grab it, run it back, and put it in the customer's hands right now, and not tell them, hey, you're going to have to wait. Usually the answer is, well, we'll just drop ship it to you, or you can order it online. We'll order it for you, get it in a week. No, this would be, hey, can you wait 2 minutes and we'll go get it for you? And we, you could call that a deep back of house, whatever you want to call it. But that's an example of, I think, how blockchain can unlock capabilities to better serve the consumer. I'll give another example of blockchain where I think it's actually very valuable. So that's a sort of consortium view. Another interesting thing about blockchain, if you break down the technology, the idea is that all nodes, all computer nodes in this network are equal. So say that you have a bunch of countries that want to coordinate with each other for tracking customs. Okay, I mean, you want to digitize the customs forms. Right now, it's all paper. You get a bill, bill of lading. You get all the goods, and you take off the paper and you write them on the customs form. Say, all right, we check this out in the port of entry, and it goes on. You want to digitize that information. The problem with the cloud as it exists today is, imagine you go to Brazil and say, hey, country of Brazil, we want to help you digitize all of your customs forms. However, all of that data is going to live in a cloud data center that is in Portland, Oregon in the United States. A lot of countries aren't necessarily comfortable with that prospect and say, well, I'm not going to sign up for digitizing it because I want this data to live in my own walls. Blockchain creates an opportunity where every country can be part of this network, but they hold their own data and the access to what they add to the node. But because it's provably safe because of the blockchain technology, all of the countries can coordinate and align. So it's sort of a deep technical value, but you're never going to unlock that value unless on a at least high level understand how the technology works, which again is what this book is about.
That's fantastic. That just means that a lot of the CXOs would need to at many levels immerse themselves into the understanding of deep tech and how the tech works, to be able to fully exploit how to make it applicable to their businesses and which parts of their businesses they can make it applicable, so as to say, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's sort of like, I think years ago, Seth Godin, who's very famous in the marketing world, was imploring companies and saying, look, you can't offload your marketing to someone else entirely. You can't offload your brain. Marketing is about, your message and your branding and your channels and your relationships with your consumers. You have to own that. Yes, you can get help from agencies, but ultimately you have to understand what it is that relationship with your consumers is. And I think technology is now getting to that point as well, where you can't outsource your brain. You have to understand, at least at some level, how you can use this work, or you're always going to be playing catch up. And nobody wants to be in that position where you're constantly trying to catch up with competitors and sort of habitually giving them openings in technology.
Yeah, and it's interesting you saying that, because it looks like the earlier decades was about efficiency through technology and digitization. So you could have created a department that digitizes and then absorb it into the organization, like physical retail and digital retail, or e-commerce started like a division in a large company, so as to say. But now the technology that you are talking about can fundamentally disrupt the business model itself of the way large businesses work, because the supply chain impact of blockchain could pretty much disrupt large retailers or others. So as to say, if somebody adopts it first or better than the others and is able to leverage it as a competitive advantage for itself. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, new technology is always disruptive. I think I do think it was Mark Andreessen who had said that there's going to be, in the future, there will be two kinds of jobs: those who are told by computers what to do, and those who tell computers what to do. And I think that can be expanded into corporations. I mean, there are companies that deeply understand the value of technology, and I don't think it's fair anymore to call them technology companies. I mean, you look at Google. Google, yes, they started entirely in the technology world, but right now they're the world's largest, most successful advertiser. That's what they are. They're an advertising company. It's where they make most of their dollars is in ads. The fact that they leverage technology advantage. Amazon is a supply chain company. Yes, they have a website. Everyone has a website. So the idea is that, oh, Amazon's a tech company. It's like, barely. They're a tech company in the sense that they leverage technology very, very well. You look at the top market cap companies, they're all companies other than Apple and Microsoft. None of them are tech companies per se. They just leverage tech very well.
Interesting. What would you term Tesla as? Car company, software company?
Oh man,
I'd love to know your view on this.
That is a great question. So this is what I say. Elon Musk is deservedly among the most richest men in the world because what he's done. He has one trick. If you really dig down to what he does, he has one trick, and he does it very well. And that is he brings agile methodologies into literally every sector that he's focused on. So he started off, they followed agile methodologies to create PayPal, then took that agility and brought it into Tesla, took that agility, brought it into SpaceX. Now he's taking that agility and bringing it into Neuralink. And when you are at your core an agile company that is comfortable leveraging technology, you're going to dominate any industry that you're in. I think it's very, right now when this is being recorded, Tesla market cap is greater than the market cap of all other car companies combined.
True.
And you can say what you want about, does the stock market necessarily represent true value? But there is a belief out there, and I think a justified one, that Tesla is playing a different game than any other car company, because what they're focused on is making endless incremental improvements at scale with speed. And the theory is that no one's going to be able to catch up who is sort of in the old guard of doing things. GM, sort of a large car company, has announced recently that they're going to turn all of their cars electric over the next few years. A few other companies tried this too. I think it wasn't BMW, maybe it was Volvo. The companies are trying this, but I think what they're missing is it's not about the electricity. It's not about the electric car. It's about the fact that they built out an infrastructure that allows them to maximize emerging technologies and constantly push updates to improve the user experience at scale.
Yeah, it's a software that happens to have a car wrapped around it.
Yeah, that's right. It's exactly well, and that's why they have the most efficient batteries. Yes, they have very good hardware, but they don't have access to a whole lot of hardware that others don't. It's their software that really optimizes the mileage that they get out of the batteries. You're right.
Yep, that's fantastic. Actually, it reminds me. I heard this in a finance class. The professor said that the role of a public limited company CEO is to make the market dream in the long term, but deliver results in the short term. Right? I think
That's
Tesla
great.
does that beautifully well. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. We're about at the end of our podcast, but I need to ask you about this term that I read. Which is part of your book. And if you can, whatever you can tell us about this term and what it exactly means and why it should be important to see CXOs. It's combinatorial innovation. Did I get that right?
Yes. Oh, I love that. Yes. Good word.
Yeah. Yes. So what is this?
Yeah. So it's worth breaking it apart. So the word combinatorial is sort of a math term that's been hijacked. Like all good sort of deep scientific and mathematical terms, I think most famously by Y Combinator. But I do think it's a very descriptive term. The idea behind combinatorial figures is that for every new variable, every new dimension, the space of opportunity explodes in a sort of growing exponential. I mean, so think about what's 2 to the power of 2 versus 2 to the power of 3. 2 to the power of 2 is 4. 2 to the power of 3 is 8. 2 to the power of 4 is 16.
Yep.
And so these
Yep.
numbers just
Exponential.
grow exponentially and get larger and larger.
Correct.
That's really the whole idea between combinatorial creativity. And that is why this decade is unlike any other decade in history. There is a economist term called general purpose technology. And the general purpose technology, in a nutshell, are technologies that are so innovative and so disruptive, they change how everyone lives their lives. So, for example, the steam-powered engine created this sort of great train network, which just changed the landscape of the entire world. Now that you can quickly and efficiently ship goods across land, which is something you couldn't do before. You had to go over water to do that. Another one is electricity. Again, one of these general purpose technologies that created and sort of spurred on the Industrial Revolution. What's interesting about this decade is normally a general purpose technology will come every generation or so at best. There are 7 general purpose technologies that are all coming together at once: AI, XR, IoT, autonomous vehicles, blockchain, additive manufacturing, quantum computers. So if you consider that each one of those in its own right has the ability to completely disrupt the economic landscape and the way that people live their lives, then you put them all together. That's what combinatorial innovation is. And that's why it's so important to actually understand the root of what these technologies are, because every new one expands the space of potential and possibilities exponentially. And that's what deep tech is. Deep tech, as a term, is not about the technology. It's about the utility. It's about the end users. And that's what's so interesting about this age, because there's never been this many technologies all coming to a head that is going to completely disrupt how people interact with each other and with the world.
That's fascinating, because the last decade, which I wrote through my entrepreneurial journey, was about social media. It looks like there are 7 equally powerful trends like social media of last decade, or 7 general purpose technologies, as you call them, right? That are coming, or 7 social media. If I would call them like that.
Or seven mobile app web revolutions all at the same time. I mean, it's crazy to think about. And what's interesting really is, again, it's about the utility. It's really about how people decide to glue these together and wire them up. Like, if you're not already in AI, you're probably not going to make a fortune in AI. However, if you have a problem and you see there's an opportunity out there to combine smart edge computing, so the intelligent edge that combines AI and IoT, maybe it's backed by blockchain to make sure that the transactions are safe and secure, and maybe the network as a whole is kept real time with quantum computers, and maybe you manufacture them specialized at scale using 3D printing. And I'm just making up some imaginary widget. I don't know what you would do with all of this, but that's the real disruption.
Yep. No, I agree with you. I mean, even if you just look at 3D printing and AI, you could have an automated system of printing products that are required for consumers, like for example, shoes, right? AI takes the measurement across, let's say, 1 million people's foot sizes, and is able to then create 15 sizes that are more comfortable than the current size connotations that we've been using in shoes, right? So that's, I don't know if I was correct in understanding what you were trying to say, right? But that's the combination that you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So finally, because we are almost out of time, give us a 2-minute reason to look out for your book, and when is it coming out? I believe there's a URL that people can sign up as well. Let me read it out to my listeners: thedeeptechbook.com. You can sign up there, but so that we are not sitting in suspense, when exactly is this book out, and why should someone read it?
Yeah, it's funny. I literally contacted my publisher yesterday to say, hey, when is this coming out? It's about 2 months. We pushed it out because a lot of reasons. We didn't want this to get caught up in the whole like end of 2020 mess.
Yes.
But it's a new year, and so it'll be coming out in a couple months. A correction: the URL is actually deeptechbook.com. I don't think there's a the.
Okay. Deeptechbook.com. Sorry, pardon my mistake there. It'll be deeptechbook.com.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so again, I mean, I would end with where we started. I mean, the fact is there is somewhere between 50 and $250 trillion of value to be unlocked over the next decade, driven by these technologies. And if you are an entrepreneur, if you are an executive and not necessarily a technology executive, or if you're a technologist and just want to expand beyond your field, I'd say that this is a narrative to get a sense of all of these technologies. At the end of every chapter, I'll add this: there are actually further reading, because the idea is I want to inspire people to really dig into the details of these. And so each chapter is sort of a synopsis of each one of these technologies. But if you really wake up to the value of extended reality, for example, it's like, wow, I really want to learn more. There are definitely books that I would highly recommend by very good authors that will allow you to dive even deeper into each one of them.
Wow. Thanks so much, Eric. This was a fascinating conversation. I'm sure our listeners are as energized as we both are, thinking about just this decade. It's not even too far into the future, just 10 years. People think 10 years is a lot. I mean, 2010 for a lot of us should seem like yesterday, right? But and already Facebook, Google, YouTube were all there in 2010. But look at how the world has changed in 10 years, and now we are talking about 7 technologies that may transform lives and millions and maybe billions of lives for the better. Fantastic, Eric. This was a very, very exciting and interesting conversation. Thank you so much for taking out time and talking to us at Transformation Talks. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Rajiv, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Transformation Talks podcast hosted by Rajiv Dingra, founder and CEO of RD&X Network. Tune in next week for another interesting episode.